Diego, and it has been so wonderful to be working with someone who's so passionate and excited about Frida and Diego and what we can do in this community to celebrate them. So, if you've been to an opera in conversation before, this is going to go a little bit differently. I'm going to not be up here, and Jose is going to give us a wonderful presentation about Frida Kahlo. We'll have time for questions at the end. If there are questions that come up for you about the opera or the opera experience, I'll pop back up here and answer those. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it to our Frida expert, Jose, to answer those questions. And you also have bio sheets there, so I just want to also call your attention. Obviously, you saw some of the artwork before you came in. We're really grateful to be in this gallery space, and thank you to Jocelyn Castle for letting us be here, as well as to Claire Caswell and Wicked Raven Productions for putting together this. You can take a look, and also feel free to take a look after as well. We'll be open. And then there is also a movie night that is happening after Opera in Conversation, starting at 7:30. Claire will be screening the new Frida documentary that some of you have heard about to much acclaim. So if you want to stick around, there'll be popcorn. And other Frida things. In the back, there's information. If you haven't gotten your opera tickets yet, please go ahead and get those. They start at $19. And then we will be back here on May 7th for our last opera conversation, which will be a special poetry response to El Último Sueño de Frida and Diego. We'll have 3 local poets who have seen and experienced the opera. We'll be writing poems in response and performing those to kick off our conversation about how we experienced the opera. So, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jose.
Oh my goodness. I have very rarely heard the word expert associated with my name. Don't let that fool you. I was introduced to Frida Kahlo in July of 1977. And this is because I married an artist. Her name was Linda Rivera. She's García now. De García. And she was working on an art piece that was so spontaneous and so full of symbolism that I learned in later years that it was pure Frida. That Linda and I started living a life. I felt like Diego. And I almost gained weight like him for a while. So I'm no stranger to the Fredonia, the Frida vibe, as I had lived it. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, we started doing Frida Kahlo questions out at the gallery we had on 13th Street, next to 2 other classic traditions in Omaha. The Hot Shop Gallery was next to us. And then a little bit further down the street was the theater, the Blue Theater, the Blue Barn Theater. This was back in the early 90s on 13th Street. And then we had another Casa de Cultura, which is a House of Culture on 16th and B. And we ended up incorporating and becoming middle class, for crying out loud. We entered the system in 2009 and started the Mexican American Historical Society as a 501c3. And now we are the fiscal agents of the museum, the South Omaha Museum, and it just keeps going. And I'm in my late 70s, for crying out loud. It's got to stop somewhere. I can't keep the brakes on it. I'm Jose Francisco Achaco Garcia Rios. This pays attention to the heritage that mestizos carry with us. After 1848, the United States of America decided to make those of us that lived in the United States citizens because of the Treaty of Guadalupe that ended the War of 1848. Well, my people didn't come until 1914, and that's because Pancho Villa made things really, really hard. And my grandfather Garcia was from the Ixmiquilpan Hidalgo. He crossed over in 1914. My mom's name, my grandfather was Rios on my mom's side. And this is why I keep this name. And when I came to Omaha, I also had an accent on the Jose. So this is a way that we identified as mestizos. And guess what? That's what we all are. We are all a part of a tradition of humanity that does things as human beings that have the color red in their blood. And I am no different than anyone else in this room. I just have certain customs that the Polish have, the Irish have, the Lithuanians have. Well, except we haven't picked up any arms lately, but so I'm going to get right into this, a model of mestizaje. Mestizaje basically means a movement of us people that start commingling cultures of societies, of civic affairs, social affairs, and we're marrying as many people as we can throughout the universe that we call humanity. So we are all part of the mestizaje movement. And here we go, I've got a clicker. The life and art of Magdalena del Carmen Frida Kahlo y Calderón, better known as Frida Kahlo, and her waking dream comradeship with Diego María de la Concepción Juan Nepomuceno Estelanzo de la Rivera Barrientos Acosta Rodriguez, and also known as Diego Rivera.
Ooh, yeah.
And this is a Mexican-American Historical Society, and I'm going to turn this off. Can you all hear me with my voice? Okay, that's going to unhinge me from this hinge, and also I'm going to get into my working clothes. Magdalena Frida Kahlo Calderón, her full name, was born on July 6, 1907. Known as Frida Kahlo, the artist often falsified her birthday. She wanted to be connected to the Mexican Revolution. So very early in life, and she was doing this when she was pre-teen. This is a photo, Frida Kahlo, 1936, that shows her maternal and paternal side generations back. Kahlo was born in Mexico, la capital de Mexico, Mexico City. Her mother, Matilda Calderón González, came from a family of Spanish generals, also with an indigenous background. This Indian should be, I shouldn't have had that word in there. Her father, Karl Wilhelm Kahlo Kaufmann, was born in Germany. Contrary to what Frida claims, he was not Jewish. Her family was Lutheran, and his family was Lutheran, and belonged to the middle class of the Grand Duchy of Baden. When he arrived in Mexico in 1891, he became Guillermo Kahlo and took up photography as a profession. It was easier to pronounce Guillermo. Frida was born into a photographic family. Her paternal grandfather sold photographic supplies in Baden-Baden. Her maternal grandfather was a studio photographer in Oaxaca, which was a state and city in southern Mexico. By the time she was born in 1907, her father had become quite a successful photographer in Mexico City. This photograph here has an inscription of her mama right here, when she was a very young lady in the 1890s, and with the rest of her family, which was quite a tradition in Mexico, having family portraits. A 2005 book by Gabby Franger and Rainier Hope traced Kahlo's genealogy and stated that despite the legend propagated by Frida, Guillermo was not Jewish Hungarian, but was born to Lutheran parents who came from the families from Frankfurt and Pforzheim. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Pforzheim.
Huh?
Pforzheim.
Pforzheim. I got to learn that. Henrietta Kaufmann, her grandmother, and Jacob Kahlo. How would you pronounce Kahlo in German?
Kahlo.
Kahlo, huh? Okay. Now, some people say she got her unibrow from her grandmother. I think it went both ways, because her mom also had pretty dark eyelashes. Now, Guillermo was married quickly when he came to Mexico to a Maria Cadena and Guillermo, which is their photograph. That marriage didn't last long because poor Maria perished quite early. She did have two daughters that ended up in an orphanage within a nunnery. And that's where they grew up and became of age. And you can notice in this picture where they're at, one of them looked like it became a nun. Now, another reason why I think this is very interesting is that I have people that disappeared on the border when they crossed, separated. And I didn't find my great aunt that separated until about 25 years ago. And guess who family she married? She married a family by the name of Gardenia. That's whether they're related. That's another thing. I haven't vetted it that far. Matilda Calderon and Guillermo Calo. This is their wedding picture. Look at the waist of this young woman. Holy enchiladas. and see those eyelashes, eyebrows. And then here she is, much older. Matilda Calderon was a very astute, very conservative woman. And Frida was more towards a father's daughter than she was. Her relationship with her mom was rather cold. And here's Wilhelm back in 1871 in, well, this is where he was born, there. But here he is in 91 in Puerto de Veracruz. And then as an older man. A lot of self-portraits, and here's his signature, 1925. He was hired by Porfirio Diaz, who ruled Mexico for about 35 years, to go throughout Mexico and photograph churches. Any church he could find, he photographed it. He also worked with Aro, who was another very famous man that was world-renowned, especially in Europe, and was responsible for documenting the Paricutin volcano in the early 40s. So Aro was around quite a lot too, a very famous man. I tried to purchase this about 3 years ago. They wanted $1,900 for the set. So if y'all know a cheaper set, let me know. But I'm developing a Kahlo library. I have already 250 volumes in our library. And one of these days we're going to open it to the public. Once I can. Frida's greatest nod to her father was undoubtedly her painting. Portrait of her father. He had already deceased for 10 years when she did this. But you notice the retablo look. And you notice the constant professionalism that Frida's father, Guillermo, projected.
What does retablo?
A retablo is a style of artistic work that has very religious connotations. It's very colonial, and a little bit further, I'll get a little bit more into the retablo style. But this here is very stylish like that. Retablo always has a phrase that gives the subject matter a flesh, that the story of why they did a retablo, which was an act of thanksgiving to the higher authority, which is a retablo. I'll get into it a little bit more. This painting was an unfinished work that Frida worked on for quite a while. And you know she has her three sisters here, and a fourth one that didn't quite make it. But also, you'll see a lot of wounds in Frida's work. And then these two unidentified were probably her father's children, her stepsisters. She never finished this. From a very young age, Kahlo learned to pose for the camera, often gazing straight into the shot. This awareness of the onlooker through the eyes of the camera, but also of her own reflection, marks the beginning of her self-made image. And that's what this Baez Luis figured out, which we all basically understood once you really started looking at what Frida and the corpus of her work through her lifetime. She poses, she is always projecting. Frida Kahlo contracted polio in 1913. I believe she was 6 years old, very young, spending several months in bed. A paralytic form of the disease was not badly disabling, but it did have some unavoidable consequences. Her right leg remained slightly deformed and shorter than her left. And she had to have built-up shoes. And you'll see in the dresses that Kahlo started wearing, the indigenous style very rarely was skirt. It was usually long. And this is a portrait that was taken by her father in 1919. And you'll see many people photograph Frida Kahlo. These are her sisters. She had three of them, Matilda, Adriana, and Cristina. Now, the sister of Cristina, the daughter of Cristina, visited Omaha about a month ago. And she was at the Latino Museum and gave a lecture on her mom and about Frida Aura. And I love this picture because it reminds me of one of my aunts. This is the way she looked when she was young. I'm telling you, she was modern.
Yeah.
And she still is beautiful. I just saw her. She had her birthday Saturday, and I went to visit her and was able to give her flowers. So there's a lot of associations that any human being, either Mexican, Chicano, whatever, have with a person like this woman. Now she is when she was 15 years old. Frida entered the prestigious Escuela Nacional Preparatoria de Mexico as one of 35 female students in a school that accepted around 2,000 males. It was the same year that the Soviet Union was formed. And that had a lot to do with Frida's life. She turned into an avid communist. And we'll go to that story as we follow her lifestyle. Look at her short hair, but she's looking right at the camera. This was done in 1922. And then it happened. On September 17, 1925, after a day of classes, Kahlo, at the age of 18, and her friend Alejandro Gomez Arias boarded a bus heading towards Coyoacán, which was her home. Minutes after they sat down on a wooden bench, the bus turned a corner and slammed into an electric trolley that was traveling full speed. The accident left Frida with a broken spinal column, a broken collarbone, broken ribs, pelvis, 11 fractures in her right leg. Also, her right foot was dislocated and crushed, and her shoulder was out of joint. Frida spent 3 months lying on her back, encased in the plaster cast, and she had about 21 of them made over her lifetime, by the way. She began painting to pass the time while healing in bed, and it became a passion for her. And this is one of the sketches that she did that began the story of what pain is through art. She first set eyes on him, and you know who him is. El Sofo. In 1922. Sofo means frog, by the way. That was the dear name for him. Was painting the mural La Creación, the creation, at the Simon Bolivar's Amphitheater in Mexico City, senior high school. She was one of the first women to study at the legendary campus. And seeing Diego paint a huge fresco was a revelation. And anybody that saw Diego Rivera's frescoes, I was privileged to see them in Mexico City on a trip down there in the 70s. It was absolutely stunning. So Diego started using her in his frescoes, especially because of her political position. Diego Rivera in Arsenal, 1928, Secretario de Educación Pública. I got this from the DiegoRivera.com. As you can see, there it is. And it was a big movement in Mexico back in the late 20s, early 20s. It started dissolving into a sindicato, but during the 20s and 30s, it was a very populist movement. And you can see Frida right in the middle of things, distributing pamphlets, or whatever she was wearing here on her. The Mexican power couple, they married in 29. And 2 years later, while staying in San Francisco, Kahlo painted the wedding portrait. And here's another retablo type of a style. And then you have the pájaro that comes in with the message from above. You have the square look, and it's made in metal. It's all had retablo. And this was Frida's way of connecting to a colonial past that she inherited because being born in Mexico, even though she was an immigrant, like many of us still are, she wanted so much to be Mexican because she was born there. And she dressed the way, she married the greatest Mexican painter of all time as far as I'm concerned. The ribbon held on the peak of the grove above the couple reeds. Here you see us, me, Frida Kahlo, with my beloved husband, Diego Rivera, painting. I painted these portraits in the beautiful city of San Francisco, California, for our friend, Albert Bender, and it was the month of April, 1931. She really put a lot of her personal spirit into her artwork also. Now here's another copy, Frida and Diego, and you can see it was F-R-I-E at the time. It changed over during the problems in Germany in the late 30s to Frida, F-R-I-D-A. A double portrait representing the couple's wedding, and then she had a small reserve, mostly presented. She was small, reserved, against this really behemoth dude, and she played the wife to the master painter. This painting was shown at the 6th annual exhibition in San Francisco in 1932, which was the first public showing of her work. And wow, San Francisco just hit like a ton of bricks. When they arrived right in the middle of the Depression. And what are these commies doing getting money, doing art, when all of these other artists are out of a job? It created quite a stir. It really did. They were in the paper a lot. It was a place she called the city of the world. And she often dreamed of it as a teenager, saying, the University of San Francisco, a city of star. Frida hung out in the Chinese section, Chinatown in San Francisco a lot. And she was always running back and forth because Diego was doing all the work. She had really nothing to do, but she was painting. She started painting. And I'm wearing this in honor of her today. I usually don't go around with jewelry. Nobody has seen me in jewelry in a long time. Sculptor Ralph Stackpole was a friend of Diego. He did everything to ensure that Rivera created the murals in San Francisco. In the 6 months Frida and Diego were in town, Diego created 3 murals at the City Club, which is connected to the Pacific Stock Exchange building at the San Francisco Art Institute, and the 3rd at the San Francisco City College. Ralph and French wife Jeanette also opened their homes to Frida and Diego, which is seen in this photograph. And these were taken in the same place by photographic firm. Everybody wanted to take a picture of Frida Kahlo. And you can see two kind of opposed, oh, what am I doing here? But I'm with my husband. Oh, and then things started happening. This is a portrait of Luther Burbank. The latter marked the first time that Kahlo moved away from the straightforward depiction of her work. Burbank is painted as half man and half tree, which could have been influenced by surrealism in San Francisco at the time, 1931. Frida found a new style of painting. Surrealism, she hated that label. I paint dreams. I paint me, not dreams. I paint my emotions, but we'll get to that later. This man was dead 7 years when Frida found out about him. But this man was a botanist that was, one of the things he did was he was responsible for the potato that we're eating now, for breeding a potato that is still being grown at this very day. I forget the name of the potato. It's a normal potato that we all eat all the time. And he was known for the botanist and for doing genes. And she did it in a very Mexican style, because everything comes out of the earth. And we go back to the earth and then we resurrect as plants or maybe another human, I don't know. She had the sky in Mexican style, the regal, which is a style that is used in Mexico quite often. And she really found a way of just not changing her style, but using an interpretive art form to express the emotion of her painting. And then she met another medic, and she was always surrounded by medical personnel. This painting depicts Dr. Elozer, Frida's most trusted medical advisor in her life. Frida got to know the doctor while she was hospitalized because of persistent pain in her right leg while she was staying in San Francisco. Dr. Elozer, a well-known doctor and friend of Diego Rivera. Diego had friends everywhere. And this man took care of Frida until her death. I mean, she was always going for his advice and contacting him. And I'm not sure if he went to Mexico. I haven't gotten that far in my research. But this man was a very important man to Frida Kahlo. And she did her portrait, a very formal portrait. An extremely formal portrait of a man that she truly did not have an emotional relationship with, but depended on him for stability of her body. Not in a sexual way, but. Frida admired retablos. Here it is again. Small paintings made of metal that are created to give thanks to celestial beings for saving a loved one due to illness or an accident. And if you have a collection of them, I picked up about 15 of them over the years, and they are works of art. It's a legitimate Mexican folk art of the late 19th century, early 20th century. Frida refers to this tradition with her usage of the grayish blue scroll that runs along the bottom of Jean's portrait. It's right here. Upon it, the inscription in Spanish, Retrato, portrait of Mrs. Jean White, painted January 31 in the city of San Francisco, California. So she altered this for her own sake, describing the portrait. It was like a label. It didn't have a thank you God for saving my son from the firing squad or saving his life after he got into a wreck. She used it as a sign to express the nature of the photograph. And here again, this was a very rich person that were attached themselves to Frida while they were in the United States of America. At this time, it was San Francisco. And then here comes Detroit. Diego got work to do a mural in Detroit. This is part of the mural. There was an enormous amount of work that was done. As you can see, very working class, very into the family of man, taking care of and mobilizing machinery. Frida was known as a housewife and just another cute little girl that dressed funny, but she was doing her art. And this is one of the first American pictures taken of her with her own identity. And the wording of this article is very pleasing and very readable from a Detroit paper in like 1932. And then Frida started doing pain. Detroit really started bringing out the pain. She read about a suicide in New York City. She painted it. Then she had the miscarriage. And she depicted it. 1932. Frida Kahlo's suicide of Dorothy Hale. What she endured. Frida's self-portraits often carry references to birth, babies, and the reproductive organs and reveals a continuing source of pain throughout her life. That being unable to bear a child. She terminated her first pregnancy. Her next two were miscarriages. She expressed her emotional pain in small sketches and major paintings. It was typical of Frida to use these setbacks creatively, and she started early. When she was first told at the hospital that she may never be able to bear a child, Frida created a birth certificate of an imaginary son. Here's another unfinished painting that reflects her experiences in an American hospital, with a flask and with the wheels and with an operating table and a bed, a metal bed. A catalog, this is from the catalog, Frida Kahlo of a cesarean. It's an unfinished artwork that includes many of the themes that the painter is obsessed with. Maternity. This is created after her miscarriage that ends in 3 months of pregnancy. The painting for Frida was like a physical, allegorical release of her sick condition and her constant passing by hospitals. She could transform pain into expression, and it is clear in this unfinished painting. And this is probably the one that everyone, well, this is surrealism. No, this was Frida grieving. When she returned home, she painted this in Mexico. It's a groundbreaking painting entitled Henry Ford Hospital. She wanted to make visible the physical and emotional pain women undergo delivering a dead male fetus when she was approximately 3.5 months pregnant. This woman was so far ahead of her times for a woman doing this because of what she went through, is that was absolutely unheard of throughout anywhere in the world, as far as I can tell. I haven't really found anything like this anywhere in any art archives up until Frida Kahlo. In 1932, Frida Kahlo and her husband, Diego, had lived in the United States for almost 3 years. Now, while Diego was growing accustomed, he loved the United States. He didn't want to leave. But that'll change pretty soon. Frida was miserable and felt increasingly homesick for Mexico. And she expressed her feeling in this painting. Gringolandia, she called it. She has a Mexican thing. Oh, these roots are trying to come up in the Mexican side. Here it is. Everything is really in turmoil. There she is, so beautiful with her Mexican flag and papel picado. And then, but she right now is being taken over by marching robots. It kind of makes you think of how many of us are now starting to become robots. This is if I had $55 million, I'd buy this painting. My dress hangs there, 33. Painting by Frida Kahlo, reflecting her view of the superficiality of American capitalism and the conflict between her desire to return to Mexico and her husband's enjoyment of this fame in the United States. And a lot of her political wherewithal comes through. Look who's here. My goodness, so recognizable. And then you have the toilet on a Grecian pillar. It just reflects the way that we have capitalized on other people's marvels. Walt Disney did it first. You heard it from me. But here she is with her dress hung in the middle of all of this. Some sort of beauty. The working masses toiling, getting shot up by brinks. It was during the Depression. So there were soldiers shooting civilians all over the country because corporations were trying to protect their assets from people that were starving and couldn't find work. Incredible painting. In 1932, Frida began a project of making a painting for each year of her life. She started with My Birth, which often reads as depicting not only her real birth, but a fantasy of her giving birth to herself. Can you believe that? And went on to include key episodes in pain. Indeed, her friend and photographer Lola Alvarez Bravo once said, "Frida is the only person I know who, by their own admission, created their own life. She is the only person who gave birth to herself." And this is a product from her own. And you notice everything is so Frida. You see this image all the way around. You could not get away from this. But she was yet adorning herself with all kinds of monkeys in the behind, and that we'll be getting to that here momentarily. In 1933, they went back to Mexico, and they set up at the O'Gorman house in San Angelo. Although Diego would keep using the studio until 41, after Frida's father died, the Riveras moved out of their twin house and into the Casa Azul in 1935, I believe. After all the difficulties of their own relationship, with a year-long separation, a divorce and remarriage, it was a Casa Azul that they found some stability and made a home. Now, I purposefully left out New York, where Diego Rivera was painting the mural for the Rockefellers. And the story is short and sweet. The Rockefellers hated it because of Lenin and what was in there. And they paid Diego his compensation and said, "Get the hell out of town." That was the end of New York. And that was the end of Diego's love affair with the United States. Because it killed him as far as getting commissions. You could have had commissions in Kansas City, Denver, St. Louis, anywhere you wanted to in the United States. They loved him. And he was the one that brought the fresco style of muralism back into vogue. And everyone wanted to be near him to learn that style. But, oh, am I back here? Okay. So here we go. Another pain. But this was more of a pain of being Mexican that she painted here. She did in 1935. Oil and metal, signed and dated at the Dolores Olmedo Museum. Dolores Olmedo's daughter was here in Omaha about 20 years ago at the Jocelyn Museum, and we were lucky enough to catch her. It was quite an event. Describing this that you just saw, which is very hard, is basically a newspaper report of a murder of a man that murdered his wife because nefarious things were happening. And Frida portrayed a naked, bleeding woman with her eyes half open, flowing from her mouth the blood. Her killer stands beside the bed with a knife. The clean pink walls are just covered with blood. Upper part of the painting, there's a scroll held up by a white dove and a black swan, retablo style. And it's an illusion, the phrase of a few small nips. That's what the newspaper called this killing. In order to underline the dramatic effect of the painting, Frida had it framed in smooth wood, which she gouged and sprinkled with small drops of red paint. It is thought that the blood was spattered outside the limits of the frame into the world of the spectator, and who became an eyewitness to the event. Where am I? I'm lost. See? I'm over here. So Frida just kept on associating. 35, she moves to the Casa Azul. She is at home. She's with her monkey, with her cats, with her garden. Now it's the most popular tourist place in Coyoacán. And boy, every one of these people will pay 10, 15 bucks to get in there. It's an incredible place. Every day you got to make your reservation before you even arrive in order to get in. La Casa Azul was where she was born and lived with her husband Diego, and then where she died. The Mexico City suburb of Coyoacán was a destination of international artists, film stars from Hollywood, Mexico, intellectual and political activists. Frida's first act at Casa Azul was to paint it blue. Traditional whitewash, the same bright cobalt blue she'd enjoyed in San Angel. It is a color Mexican folklore held would ward off evil spirits. I've seen that in Aztec texts, and there is basis for this that I have seen myself. She redesigned her mother's more typical middle-class garden, creating an open courtyard for living in night and day, and adding ponds and fountains. Emmylou Packard and Frida Kahlo, a very rich lady in the United States that had a really strong relationship with Frida. At Casa Azul, Frida and Diego hosted the who's who of Mexico's intellectual and cultural elite. They also greeted guests from around the world. The flock to Mexico was an exciting, progressive place to be. And it was. Europe was in shambles after World War I. Mexico was the home for Italians and Germans and Greeks and so many people that had to leave Europe, not because of the Nazis now, but because, well, not before the Nazis, but it was a mess after World War I, and the political situation was very unstable. They entertained a group of friends to include film stars like Cantinflas, like Russian Arkady Beutler, Costa Rican singer Chavela Vargas, who became one of her loves. She really absolutely loved Chavela Vargas. Guatemalan writer Luis Cardosa Aragon. The Chilean Pablo Neruda had a relationship with Frida. And French surrealist André Breton, who was instrumental in getting Frida's artwork eventually shown in Europe. That's her kitchen. Wow, I dream of having a kitchen like that. Her garden, as it looked back in the 50s, probably after she had died, there's no way would she have this happening. There wouldn't be any. Oh, I guess they were all concrete casts. This is the way it looks now. Very, very formal, very neat and clean. The Casa Azul, along with the other house that was joined where Diego would be. It was Frida's native Mexican Xoloitzintli dogs that were her favorite pets. Hairless. They're the Aztec hairless dogs that were guides to the afterlife. Their name came from an Aztec god, Xolo, and the Nahuatl word for dog, Iscuitli. Of course, she had monkeys. A menagerie that included an eagle named Caca Blanca, named after the white excrement that birds do. Then there were the monkeys, spider monkeys for Lang Chang, that Diego gave her, who became famous after appearing in her painting, Cañeto de Guayabal. Over the years, Frida filled lively and ever-changing space with folk art and popular curios, including the skulls of huge papier-mâché effigies. They call these Judases. They're made out of paper. And to this day, Mexicans will build 12 foot high, and during Holy Week, they would parade them and then set them afire, like on Friday or Saturday. I'd love to do that here in Omaha, but the fire marshal says, and all of these here were curios. And I've studied some of these, and they look very familiar to me. Especially this, from Tonalá, the Tree of Lives. I have one that looks just like that. And then Trotsky arrived. Leon Trotsky on January 8, 838. He arrived at Pico, Mexico from Norway, along with his wife Natalia. Frida and Max Schotman is here. I haven't studied him. I really don't know much about him. Look at Frida. Eyes to the front. And this is a kind of a bunch of pictures of Frida involved with Trotsky in front of Lenin. This is, I believe, the Lenin that Diego drew in New York. An earlier piece back in 28, them marching, and then what of her body cast that I believe she was buried with, and I'm not sure if she was buried in that. Very, very involved. Diego got kicked out of the Communist Party 3 times, and he never got back until after Frida's death. Frida was a cart carrier all the way through. And then Trotsky got it because he moved out of the Casa Azul when Diego found out that they were messing around. And instead of shooting him, he told them, get away, get out of here. Of course, Diego was known, he also was quite a phalanger, what do you call it? Yeah. He was hacked, pop, bad, messy mess. A Cuban did it. Ramon Mercado, Leon Trotsky's assassin, Mexico City. He attacked on the 21st in 1940. It's an AP photograph. Frida was detained. She got arrested because they thought she had something to do with it. Because she had met with the assassin, but Diego set it up to where she was released. These are all of the photographers that loved Frida Kahlo. Edward Weston, Tina Modotti, a Cubana that was very European and very, very well, no, she was Italiana, I'm sorry. She was Italian. A very important lady. Manuel Alvarez Bravo and Lola Alvarez Bravo. Icons of Mexican photography. Lucien Bloch, Martin, all of these were Mexican, Europeans, and Americans that loved taking photographs of Frida. Especially Nicholas Murray. They could have very well been married if it wasn't for Diego. And Frida's inability to really do anything marriage-wise, but Murray loved her to death. In 1939, she finally showed in Europe and sold this painting. This is an unfinished painting that nobody has found. It's lost. Some people say this is the death table. Here's another bigger. This is lost. It hasn't been found. There's a lot of depiction here. She also did some teaching when she was starting to get ill and couldn't leave the house. She brought young people in to teach. Here's one of her later, in 45, she just couldn't do the nice surrealistic thing, so she did this, depicting her frame that she used to use to paint, but now all the paint was coming from her body. The classic, the Frida of Two Hearts. I believe I saw that in Kansas City at the Nelson Art Gallery some years ago. It's just absolutely stunning. With the umbilical cord, the Petregal, just absolutely trying to stave off the bleeding, but no, it ain't going to work. And one of my favorites, the Roots, 1943. Here again, the Petregal, the fact that we all are natural in our instinct and our genetic makeup. The broken column, self-portrait with her spine problem. She did this in 44 as her heart started deteriorating. Look at all these nails on her. And she very rarely found herself or did herself without any breast protection. And then later in life, at 47, and the Two Fridas was the only work that she received money, a significant amount of money. Oh, it's 4,000 pesos. About $500 in today's money. That's as much as she ever made. This painting now is selling for about $53 million. Maybe $100 million now. I think it was $153 million, wasn't it? One of her last paintings. Down here, just before she died, or she put down Viva la Vida. It's a still life. And there she is in her bed, incapacitated, still with a smile on her face. Her hair is getting longer and longer. Her corset. This is when she was in the hospital, and you can see they had to amputate her leg off. And this is what she wore. It's right here. This was done in about 53, a year before her death. This was a political culture that she did. She did this, let's see, 54. I think this was the last painting she did of herself. It's not very well known. And then death came. Cisqueros. You had all kinds of people here that came to her funeral. She had an open casket. And then Diego Rivera, who a year later married and went to Russia and tried to get well, but it didn't work. They were a wonderful couple. Nicholas Murray took that photograph. On Frida's death, Diego gave Casa Azul to the nation. Today it is Frida Kahlo Museum. There's a wardrobe that was discovered because it was hidden away in the closet for God knows how long. Her falcon, Caca Blanca, and then the merchandising started. Pop, 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 pop. Her stamp. I couldn't figure out how the USPS did a stamp. That's her power. She was a communist. They did a commemorative stamp for her. I mean, I freaked out. And guess who was involved in this? My wife. She did a portrait. I think I have this kind of backwards. Yeah. My wife did a portrait in celebration of this in 2001. And I lost it somewhere. It's not in there. I don't know what happened. This was what Linda was drawing, painting in 1777 when I married her. I'm going to tell you what I saw her. When I saw her painting one night at 2 in the morning, where was she? I went downstairs. I'm going to tell you where she was. She was up here. Ah! Look at her. She did paper cuttings, Frida. That's her classic. Oh, there she is. There she is. She didn't do that, but they had her involved. We also did all kinds of Frida things. This was at 16th and B. We had a Frida art show, and there's a cake that we still use. We're going to have a July 7th, by the way, birthday party for Frida. That's in the works. We were in Nelson Art Gallery about 10 years ago. Oh, God, I love that. Here at 21, we had that at the Apollon Art Space. I did this memorial for her in her memory. Something that reminded me of Casa Azul. Is the only artist in the history of art who tore open her chest and heart to reveal the biological truth of her feelings. Diego Rivera.
My life seems boring.
Was Diego a communist too?
Yes. Diego was communist before Frida was. And that's why he was so attracted to Frida. Because at an early age, she belonged to a student group called Los Cachuchas, the cat wearers. And they were rowdy rebels. And they somehow got involved with party politics. So Diego was very attracted to her because of that. And they became a couple.
I was wondering, it's a costume that was not only in the slide with the costumes, but it's also in the slide with Frida's mother, and it was to the left. And it is a costume that is going to be featured in the opera. And it's the one with the almost halo-like dress around the face.
There's a Tijuana.
Okay.
It's the Tijuana costume from somebody help me.
Oaxaca.
Yeah, well, Oaxaca, but it was also in the coast. Tehuantepec. They were from Tehuantepec, yes. Oaxaca, they had a similar, but at Tehuantepec, it was a huge fan. And women were bosses in Tehuantepec. They were the ones that were the tribal leaders, even as mestizos. They still had very strong ties to indigenous, because they weren't that far away from that generation. All the intermarriage since Cortez came in 1521, I'm a product of it. I got caciques in the family, I got mulattoes in the family. I've got all kinds of variables in my own blood. From I come from Hidalgo, my people come from Hidalgo, the state of Hidalgo in Mexico. Anybody? Yes. Somebody asked me the last time if she knew of any stars or was she ever in any movies. I've been unsuccessful in finding that connection, so if anybody can help with that, I'd love to get a thread on that. Because we have a huge CNA, the Golden Age of Mexico collection in our museum, the South Omaha Museum of Immigrant History. And I'm going to want to put a exhibit together in that in November of this year. And I'm looking for a Frida Kahlo collection. Well, thank you very much.
Are you connected with the Museo Latino? Museo Latino?
Yes.
Are you connected with that?
Well, back in '92, I was. That's when Magdalena García came from Mexico with a degree. And she visited us because we had a small kiosk on 16th and Jackson, across the street from the bus terminal. At the time, we were in Operation Cats, Cultural Arts Together. That was a Bemis situation. And they gave us a desk in this with a bunch of other people. And Magdalena walks in, just came from Mexico, I want to do things. So guess who we introduced her to? David Catalan. And the rest is history. The Polish home, when that came into, she got out of the livestock exchange and became an institution. We are Chicanos. Everything we do is in here, around us. We don't go to governments, we don't go to anywhere to do what we do. It's always from the community or from our own collection. So, and now we had the money, it could be different. Because we'd be serving a lot more people than just, you know what I'm saying, in a community setting. And even though I'm 78 years old, we still do that. We still have Casas de Cultura. And that's what we have at South Omaha Museum. On the May 4th, we're going to have a Cinco de Mayo, that's a historical Cinco de Mayo. May 4th. And I have, if anybody wants a pamphlet, there's some on the table back there. And you're all welcome to come.
Would you explain to people where the South Omaha Immigrant Museum is?
It's 42nd Center Mall.
Second floor.
Second floor. And go to the second floor, you find parking. You don't have to go through the mall and come down to the second floor.
It's on the west end.
Yes, on the west end. Roger, Dodger. Yes, thank you very much. And Viva la vida.